Thanks, Richard, and hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk about outside play for children, what the benefits are of this, how it used to be, as Richard was saying, what some of the barriers are now, and importantly, what we can do to change this, because we do have to change it if we want to see improvements in children's physical and mental health. And I'm going to do it in quite a big picture way, just to sort of help us to get thinking and talking about children's lives and play now. So on our Playing Out website, we've got a lot of information and evidence, research, films, case studies, lots of things that you could follow up with if you're interested. But I just want to keep it sort of big picture for here. And also because Playing Out is a kind of at heart a parent-led movement, I'm going to talk to you through kind of introducing you to a few people along the way. So the first person is me. That is me in the 1970s, playing out with my gang on our bikes. And just to put it into a bit more sort of current looking, so it's in colour, that's me in the pink dress outside our house. And back in the 1970s and 1980s, playing outside was a natural and normal part of everyday life for most children. You played out after school, weekends, holidays, on the streets and patches of ground close to where you lived, with children of all ages who happened to live there. And this gave us a huge amount. So it gave us huge physical activity, running around, games, doing all kinds of different physical exercise through that. It taught us new skills like riding a bike or doing a handstand or climbing a tree. It also gave us a chance to experience informal sport, so putting down jumpers for goalposts, drawing some stumps on a wall, doing gymnastics competitions with our friends. It gave us a chance to learn to socialise, so making new friends, falling out, and then learning how to make friends again. And also taught us independence and resilience. There was a lot of problem solving and imagination in our games. And gradually, as you got older, your patch kind of extended in terms of how far you could go and what you could do. And it also gave us a huge sense of community and belonging. We knew our neighbours, we knew our patch, and we felt like we were part of that. And underneath all of that was a huge amount of fun and happiness for children every day. Now, it wasn't all positive. Obviously, there were a lot of difficulties that you can imagine coming out of all those activities, but there was a lot of learning even through all of that. And I think another key thing is that in all of it, the child, we were at the centre. We could choose if we went out or stayed in. We could choose if we were part of a game or not. And we were following our enjoyment and our interests and our instincts. And that puts you very much kind of at the heart of everything, which is a very, very different feeling from life now. Also very important to say about Playing Out back then is that it was completely free. Obviously, there was no cost at all. It didn't matter whether your family had money or a car or even an adult to help you to play outside, and you didn't have to go to a really special space. What you needed was access to space where other children were. And if you had that, you just got all of those things that I just described above, all of that richness and all of those benefits. So we can kind of see in a way that access to space was actually children's access to a lot of the health benefits, physical and mental and developmental and happiness. And also that Playing Out in that sense was a very democratic, inclusive thing for children. It's, in today's language, it would be a very universal offer. It was nearly all children who did this. So how have things changed now? I was going to say here, I'd like to introduce you to Maddie, a young girl who was going to say a few words. As well as working with Playing Out, I work with a project in an estate on the edge of Bristol. It's an area with a huge amount of poverty and a lot of challenges, and where children are full of talent and ideas. And Maddie and I have been doing a bit of research around whether children play or not, and these were her words about what play was to her. Unfortunately, they don't work on this platform, but I can summarize what she said. So if you imagine a 10-year-old girl, and she basically says that she cannot play out at all. Outside of her home is a communal garden. It's covered in dog poo. Everybody smokes, so it's a horrible environment to be in. And out the front of her house, there's just traffic 24/7. It's very dangerous, and she cannot play out there at all. So if her sister and her want to play, they always have to play indoors. When she's asked, would you like to play outside more? She says, I would really like to get outside and engage myself with other children and other things and do what other people do, but I can't. And the rest of that interview is also available on our website. It's very important and valuable, I think, to hear from children. But what's clear from what she describes, and also from these statistics, is that we're in a very different world now from the one I was describing earlier. Playing out is not the norm anymore. It's not what the majority of children do. The statistics have actually sort of flipped round to be the opposite. And over a few decades, the freedom that children had and all those benefits has been massively eroded. So what is on offer for children around outside play, trying to get a sense of how it is now? Well, children, not all children, many children will have organised visits to friends' houses where they can play in the garden. They'll have family activities and outings. Not all children have those, but there is that. There's also trips to the park. Now, parks and playgrounds are incredibly important for children. I've chosen this photograph because actually they've kind of become almost the only space that people feel children should be playing in, compared to the kind of huge freedom children had before. And so then you get to the question, well, what is your park like, and can you actually get there? And for a lot of children, they're not great and you can't get there. So parks are still important, but the context around them has really changed, which I'm sure we'll probably hear more about as well. And I also like this photograph because it's sort of a bit of a metaphor of what's happened to childhood. We've gone from where we as children were part of public space. We could roam and be part of the streets and spaces where we live. And now, it's in the park and actually in a caged off, fenced off bit of the park usually. Also, of course, there are a huge amount of clubs and classes and activities that children have. And these are wonderful. They are also, however, timed, scheduled and led by adults, which is very different to what children had before. And indoors, we know that, children's lives are increasingly looking like this, and that this is becoming a bigger and bigger part of children's lives. And overall, these changes point to children's outdoor play having become much more organised, outdoor play and their lives actually, having become much more organised, much more scheduled, much more supervised by adults all the time, and actually needing an adult often to get to the place or the activity or the friend's house. And sometimes that might need a car, or sometimes that might need money. So equalities wise, you can see that this is far less democratic than the opportunities to play and be physically active that children used to have, and far less inclusive. And children's lives have also become far more indoors and inactive. As Richard was saying earlier, talking about these physical activity figures, they're at an appalling level, and children's physical health and mental health is at crisis point, actually. And that is what makes these conversations and this conversation we're having now so important to look at. So why have children's lives changed, over these past decades? That's a huge question and a very complex answer. And there are a lot of debates around this. And screens are obviously a massive factor. I mean, they're also a massive side effect, because if you can't go out and do anything, that's kind of the option you've got. But for today, I just want to stay with the idea of space, really, because as I described from when I was young, space is what gives children the choice to go out and play and be active. And safe space is also an area where actually we could change things for children. We could do something about this. And it's also where we can affect equalities. And it's also an area that isn't talked about enough. So I just want to say a bit more about the changes to space now. So one of the biggest changes since the 80s really is traffic. Cars have doubled since the 80s. The types of cars there are, what they can do, the way that people drive, all of this is very, very different. And streets are no longer the shared spaces that they were. They have become just for cars, and kind of woe betide you if you're not crossing the road quick enough. So, you know, that is a danger. It's not a perceived danger. It's actually an actual danger. And it's very understandable that this is one of parents' biggest worries about giving children freedom. But there's also many other changes that are also to do with space and the environment that have happened to make this less accessible for children, less safe, less welcoming over time. So, you know, no ball game signs and unwelcoming rules everywhere, particularly on housing estates, particularly in social housing. It's crazy when we've got a country where children are barely active, that on the one bit of space where they could go out and play freely for no cost, there's a sign telling them they can't. And we know that no ball game signs means no children, basically. The message is you are not wanted here. So there's not that same permission for children to be out in the spaces where we live. A lot of spaces have been sold off, you know, small patches of land for developments, but also bits of parks and other green space. So that is also a big change that has been happening. And a growing culture of complaint about children playing. And this has we've seen this get much more since COVID, actually, probably people working from home, but also the fact that we've kind of lost this acceptance that the noise of children playing out might be really irritating sometimes, but is a part of life. And needs, you know, as in back in the day, as I was describing, if there were issues around too much noise, it was the neighbours that would come out and help sort that out, tell you to move away because their wife was ill or get away from their car. Now, you know, these things, the police are involved, or people in social housing are getting letters, you know, saying that they might not be able to keep their tenancy because of noise from children playing. Children playing out is listed as antisocial behaviour alongside people selling drugs. I mean, again, it is crazy if we have got to the point where children playing out is categorised as that. I'm not saying there aren't problems sometimes of people living very close together, but the culture has kind of shifted so that playing out can actually be kind of criminalised or, you know, complained about and shut down, basically. Another big change since the days I was talking about is that people don't know their neighbours so much. There's not the same sense of community often. So actually you don't necessarily feel confident that your neighbours will be keeping an eye out, or that your child is in a community that they know. And that's a big change. And for many people, antisocial behaviour itself and crime are also part of why, you know, it doesn't feel safe to let children out. And, you know, together these things have kind of taken away a lot of children's freedom. No one set out to do that. It's just while decisions were being made about other things, nobody really thought about children. But this is also the area, I mean, it sounds really negative and it sounds almost quite overwhelming listing all these changes and how it is, but it is actually also the area where we could change things, and where if we do decide as a country to get together and change this, it could be game changing for children's health and happiness. So I'm going to move on to much more positive things now and like to introduce you to Emma. So Emma is from Hull. She's got 3 boys. When they were really little, she really wanted them to play outside and have the freedom and the play that she'd had when she was young. And she felt really trapped inside her home. And then she came across Playing Out and the idea of resident-led play streets. So a play street is when you get together with your neighbours on a street and you decide to temporarily close the street just to through traffic and open it up for play and community. And people do this maybe once a week or maybe every 2 weeks, every month. You can choose, and you need your council support about it. And Emma did this for over 7 years with her children. And in this blog, she writes about the huge benefits that claiming back a bit of space brought to her children, herself, her street, and her community. Her children grew up in this time and became teenagers who were very active, very independent, and very community minded. And she herself, felt like she had wonderful relationships on her street and that they were also keeping an eye on her children, and also that her street felt a much more lovely place to live. So you can see that a simple intervention around reclaiming a bit of space, life pours back into that. And it can actually make a really big difference at a local level. And these play streets also, it's not just the change they do on the street, but it's also kind of the signal they give. They show, children need this. We need a bit of space back. And they give the idea to other people and the permission almost to think, actually, I want my children to be out. And that's exactly what happened when we started the idea 15 years ago now in Bristol, a couple of streets across from where I am now. The idea started to spread. People saw it on Alice and Amy's street and said, I want to do that thing you're doing. So it's not just Emma's street now. We can see that today more than 1,600 UK communities have had regular play streets. More than 48,000 children have benefited. 24,000 parents have been part of making that happen, parents and residents, helping to keep the space safe and open it up. And 100 councils have been really positive and have put supportive policies in place to help make this happen. And the impact of play streets, it's what I just said about Emma's streets, really, but there's a lot more on our website if you want to read more in depth about how those spaces are actually giving children back the things I described at the beginning about, children getting a chance to learn to ride a bike, to try out different sports, to make friends, to learn all kinds of things, as well as knitting the community together a bit more. And I suppose recreating those eyes on the street so your children can be out with more confidence, not on a play streets day. But despite all this, play streets are absolutely not the answer. I mean, only a fraction of parents are ever going to want to take this big action or feel that they're able to, that they've got the time, the confidence, they're not dealing with other challenges. And also children, they need more than a session like this every couple of weeks, every month even. We need children to be able to play and to be physically active and to have friendships every day, because this is what's so crucial to their health and well-being. So, what other positives have come from this movement that are going to help us get there? So the first thing is, what we see through all of these play streets is that if you give children space and there are other children there, they will just play. You don't need to try and come up with techniques to make them be active. I mean, you can't keep them still. And this photograph actually is very similar, if you put it in black and white, to the one at the beginning where children were very active in the street. Nothing's really changed about children in that sense. Once they're out, once they've found their feet, but once they're with friends, that's the crucial factor. Second thing is, children want this. They want this themselves. And we've seen through the Play Streets movement, through countless kind of evaluation and feedback, that children living on a play street absolutely love it when that time comes around. They love being out with their friends and they choose that every time. It's not to say by the end of it, someone might wander off and go on a phone or have a bit of a quiet time. But on the whole, children want to be out with their friends. And this is also something that's come from most big consultations with children, one of the top answers is we want to play with our friends. We also know that parents want this. So only, as I said, a fraction of parents are going to take this big action. And a very broad range of parents has taken this action. But for every one of those, there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of parents who are going to absolutely be feeling the same trapped indoors feeling with their children, unhappy about them being on screens all the time and wanting better for them and possibly remembering, the joys of that playing out. So there's a huge movement out there that can be tapped into of people who want things to be different. And with Play Streets, this has created a huge platform for us playing out to work with other groups and organisations, and you'll hear from some today, to call for bigger policy change. And those policy changes will need to be across transport, for safer streets, housing, building housing that actually has space for children to play, planning, public health, getting public health messages out about children and play. But also some really immediate changes that don't even cost anything, like every council supporting Play Streets, getting rid of no ball game signs. There's huge amounts of things that could be done so that children can have lives where they can be outside more, they can be active more, they can get around more, they can see their friends. That's what everyone wants to do. And this is what we've been doing as Playing Out, working with others over a lot of years. And you can read on our website our manifesto and the things that we want to call for in terms of policy change. But I just want to mention that that's our end sort of mission, is that children could be free again to play out where they live and to have that opportunity to play and have friends and be active close to home. And one of the most important things that's happened on this that Richard also mentioned is the recent parliamentary inquiry into children, young people and the built environment. And Playing Out and the Playing Out movement was one of the groups and organisations that helped to bring this about. In fact, we couldn't quite believe it came about and they agreed to do it. And it's an absolutely critical opportunity, really, because it's Parliament scrutinising government and saying, what is the state of children outside in the environment? Do they go out? How do they go out? What stops them? Do they want to go out? What impact does it have if they don't? What impact does it have if they do? And looking at what needs to change and what the government should be doing. And this inquiry, many groups and organisations here today have been giving evidence to this, and a report will be coming out in June. And really this report, full of recommendations for what government and probably very likely the next government can do to change things, is a huge opportunity for us all to get behind and to help try and change things for children going forward, because it is desperately needed. But it feels like change is in the air and we can do it. So I hope you're all feeling enthused by that as well. Thank you.